I want it all, and I want it now. That's the title from a rock song released back in 1989. And as I reflect, not so much on the song, but on that title, I am thinking that is a great description of King Solomon. I want it all, and I want it now. Solomon is a man who was famous for asking for wisdom. He didn't ask for wealth. He didn't ask for power. And God was so pleased with his request that God gave him great wisdom, but also great wealth and riches as a bonus. King Solomon was greater in riches than all the other kings of the earth. Now, this was a blessing from God, but it was a blessing that could be used either wisely or foolishly, and Solomon was foolish. Solomon is a good example of what we call extravagance. He accumulated things well in excess of his need. Take, for example, houses. Now, how many houses does any one person need to live in? Well, you could have a primary residence, maybe throw in a beach bungalow as well for vacation time, but do you need a dozen houses to live in? You see, Solomon is described as having the many houses and the expensive cultivated gardens, country estates, and city property. And why? Because he could afford to buy it all. Solomon also equipped his homes with gold dinnerware, and only gold. It says he would not use silver because silver was of a lesser value, and for Solomon, only the best will do. He sent ships out all over the world to find him new treasures. They brought back such things as ivory, apes, and peacocks. Now seriously, who needs apes and peacocks running around their backyard? King Solomon did. You see, Solomon was accumulating wealth and things to the point that it became like a game for him. How much stuff could he find and purchase? How diverse could he make that collection of things that he had? Whatever his heart desired, that's what he got. If he wanted it, he could afford it, and so he purchased it. And this betrays a character flaw in King Solomon. Now, using his life experience as recorded for us in the scriptures and the words of wisdom he put for us in the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, I want to offer to you a word to the wise regarding money and the things that money can buy. First, beware of greed. Now, greed is an unhealthy desire for money and things. Now, let me clarify. It's not the possession of money and things, because that in itself is not necessarily a problem. After all, it was God who blessed Solomon with his wealth and riches. Now, greed is an attitude. It's a desire that is not spiritually healthy. Now, we talk about the haves and the have-nots. And you might think it's the have-nots who have the problem with greed because they have so little they wish they had more. Well, there is that problem among the have-nots, but it's also among the haves. They have as much of an issue with greed, if not even more. At least that's what Solomon says. See, Solomon's a good example of someone who had plenty and still wanted more. Solomon writes, "Whoever loves money never has enough, and whoever loves wealth will never be satisfied." Solomon spoke from his own experience. He always wanted more. Let me give you another word to the wise. Beware of self-indulgence. Let me give you just a good rule of thumb for all of life. That is this. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. You need to memorize that. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Now, in Solomon's case, he could afford to purchase anything he wanted. Doesn't mean he should have purchased everything that he purchased. Because the question I raise is this: did he really need all the things that he accumulated unto himself? Now, before I jump too heavy on Solomon, I got to back it up for a moment and take a look at us. I mean, who among us has not occasionally stood at a closet door and looked at all the clothes that you haven't worn in forever? Or who among us hasn't had a vehicle that we rarely use, and yet I had to have it at the time I purchased it? Or maybe boxes in the attic or the garage just filled with possessions, and they've been there for the longest time. You see, every one of us needs to occasionally take stock and inventory of ourselves and to see how much we're accumulating that we don't actually need. Let me give you another word to the wise. Beware of envy. Beware of envying what other people have. Solomon wants you to imagine this scenario. You've been invited to a banquet table of some rich and high and mighty person. As you're sitting there, you're seeing all the sumptuous banquet that's laid out before you. You're looking at all the lavish decorations, the fine trimmings. You're thinking to yourself, man, I love this stuff. I wish I had it. Solomon said you ought to pick up that dinner knife that you've got there before you. Hold it up to your throat if you ever start to think like that. If you're ever thinking, I'm going to wolf all this stuff down and you're going to eat it up. I wish I had it all. No, don't think like that. Don't crave the fine delicacies because that food is deceptive. Don't wear yourself out trying to get rich like this guy. And you know what that feels like, to want something that's out there. I got to have it because someone else has it. You know, that's the way that the marketers work with us. They show us the latest fashion and fad, and we think, I got to have that thing. What's the newest thing on the market? I need to get that. What's the thing that everybody's talking about that everybody has? Well, actually, keep this in mind. Anytime you use a phrase like that, everybody's got it. No, everybody is never everybody. There's a lot of us who don't run out and purchase the latest and the greatest thing. And you don't have to go out and purchase it either. You see, you don't want to let greed and envy get inside you deep and start eating away at you. Here's what Solomon says: a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy will rot the bones. Now, when I think about Solomon and all his warnings to us, I got to ask the question, so how come Solomon didn't practice what he preached? Now, it's possible that he knew the rules. After all, he's the wisest man in the world, and he just ignored his own rules. Now, it may be that his wisdom didn't figure out the rules of wealth and money until later in life after he'd already broken all the rules. Now, I don't know which way it was for Solomon, but either way, what Solomon tells us rings true. Still, you might ask the question, how can we take this guy seriously? I mean, after all, here's a wealthy man telling us, oh, you're better off not having all of my money. Yeah, right. But Solomon does say things like that. For example, he says, oh, it's better to have just a little and the fear of the Lord than to have great wealth and all the trouble that comes with it. Or he'll say, it's better to have a small serving of vegetables with a lot of love than it is to have a fattened calf and a whole bunch of strife. Now, while on the surface all that sounds good enough, it makes sense. I got to ask the question, Solomon, if you believe this to be true, why didn't you just give away all your wealth and be more like us? Well, let me tell you, whatever you think about Solomon and the way he misused his wealth and riches, I'm not here to disparage money and the things that money can buy. I want to remind you that these kind of things can be a blessing from God. Not only did God bless Solomon with great wealth, but there was Abraham and other great saints in the Bible who also were wealthy people. I believe it's appropriate to work hard, to invest well, and hope for better things to come. That you want to take care of yourself and take care of your family in a good way, and maybe even enjoy some of the pleasures of life. I'm okay with all of that. What I'm promoting today is contentment. Contentment is a calmness in the soul regarding your present circumstances, whatever they may be, good or bad, I don't care. I'm at peace in my soul. Contentment is a discipline over your desires and a wisdom in all the choices you make. Contentment is a perspective on life that recognizes the things that truly matter and what really doesn't matter at all. Contentment is a confidence in the Lord that He will provide you no less than what you need to live a good life. You see, contentment is a healthy way of looking at money and the things that money can buy. You know, we talk about our basic needs and the simple pleasures of life, and really, that's all any of us actually need. Everything else is just gravy. Now listen, when it comes to meat and potatoes and gravy, I love the gravy. If Jeanette puts it out there, I'm going to scoop it on. But when all is said and done, I can also do without the gravy. Because it's the meat and potatoes that matter more. That's where your real nutrition comes from. That's what fills you up. You see, the extras of life, the gravy, if you will, you and I should know that we could live with them or live without them and still be happy, at least if we learned how to practice contentment. That was Solomon's error. See, for Solomon, there wasn't enough gravy in the world to satisfy him. He was always wanting more. Solomon lost sight of what really matters in life. You remember when the disciples asked Jesus to teach us how to pray? Remember that famous line? Give us this day our daily bread. It brings to mind just the bare necessities you need to live. And God will bless you with those things. The question is, how much more do you really need? I would advise you this way. Before you seek greater things, first learn to be content with the daily bread.